Despite being one of the most fundamental mechanics in both EVE Online and EVE Echoes, the concept of server ticks is something unknown to most players. So in today's Catskull Academy lesson, we're going to be talking about server ticks and how these affect things like lock-on times and indeed your warp and align times. This comes hot off the heels of discussions recently about sub 1 second align times for people running AFK cargo hauler interceptors. So, without further ado, if you do enjoy this video, please let me know. Hit like on it if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, ding that notification bell if you haven't already, and if you do want to go the extra mile and be super awesome to help support this channel, come join us on Patreon and on my Redbubble merchandise store. Anyway, all that said and done, let's talk about server ticks. So first of all then, what are server ticks and why do they even exist? Well, in a game the size of EVE Online or EVE Echoes, there is a lot of information for the servers to process. If you imagine that just with your ship in a system, the server needs to understand where you are, the direction you are traveling in, how fast you are traveling in, if you're accelerating or decelerating, what weapons you have, what state those are currently in, like are they firing, are they not firing, are you using afterburners, are you using micro warp drives, what's your signature radius, what state is your shield, armor and hull all at, and how close are you to everything else around you. That's just one ship, and that's not including drones. If we then multiply this by 10 ships in a system, all with drones out, you can see how things can get pretty hectic pretty quickly. Now, because of this, neither EVE Echoes nor EVE Online operate on a truly real-time format. Instead, they use ticks. Every single second, the server checks what is going on and reports that back, rather than it be just this constant feedback loop of what's going on, who's going where, how's it all working. The server will periodically check once every second, and this helps reduce some of the strain off the server, and it's kind of ultimately how time dilation works in both these games as well, in that they can slow down the server ticks in order to give the server a bit more time to kind of process all the data that's going on. That's not entirely accurate before someone jumps on me in the comment section, it's just a very simplified way of looking at it. Now, how does this affect your game and your ship? Well, if we were to open up the fitting menu here on this particular Astero, for example, and go into the navigation tab, you'll see I have a warp preparation time of 2.1 seconds. Now, this can be loosely translated as the time it takes to achieve warp from a standing still position. But it's not entirely accurate. 2.10 seconds is the theoretical time. The actual time it will take to warp is 3 seconds, because it will happen on the server tick. Now, ultimately, this means that if you are trying to reduce your warp preparation time, there is literally no difference between 2.1 and 2.01. They will both warp on 3 seconds. No matter what you do, that is how the server will read that and translate it. Whether it's 2.01 or 2.99 or even 3.0, that is literally going to be a 3-second align time. This, therefore, will not warp any faster until I get it down to be, for example, 1.99. If I hit 1.99 seconds, I suddenly have a 2-second warp time. This is why in EVE Online we often hear people talking about things like sub 3 second warp time, because you want to be able to warp within 3 seconds. It doesn't matter if your warp time is 2.9 or if it's 1.2, it's still lower than the necessary 3. Now, with the recent discussion going on regarding interceptors and the ability for people to instant lock and blap them with alpha damage, a lot of people have said, well, I just need to push my align time even lower. The point is, you will never have an align time lower than 1 second. It doesn't matter if you are sitting on a ship that has been geared out to the wazoo with all kinds of inertial stabilizers and things like that. It will always happen in a second's time, because that is how server ticks work. Therefore, the second you hit the button to go to warp, it is going to be on the next tick that it actually occurs. And that means that if you are on grid and someone hits to lock onto you at the same time you hit to warp, you are going to achieve warp in 1 second, and if their lock-on speed is sub 1 second as well, then they are going to lock onto you and fire at the exact same time as the server recognizes that you are about to warp, and the server will prioritize that incoming damage and you will be blapped. That is how this works. So it is important to note that even if you think your align time is drastically tiny, that is not going to save you if someone has a instant lock-on, so-called instant lock-on, because again, of course, it is still constrained by server ticks. This is just a kind of key point, that in most cases, if you are navigating in something like an Astero, here for exploration, having a low warp preparation time is good. Sub 3 seconds is pretty good, because it means in most situations, people are going to struggle to lock onto you in that time frame. But if you want to be absolutely safe from a instant lock-on, it's not going to happen. Getting below 1 second is pretty much the best you can do, but if it's a 1.2 or a 1.1, that is a 2-second warp time, which means your opponents have 2 seconds to lock you and fire their weaponry. Important point to note here, and I hope this video has done a good enough job of explaining that to you all. I know I may have rambled and repeated some of the stuff, but I do feel this is very important, and a lot of people don't understand this concept, despite the fact that it is absolutely key to everything in EVE Echoes and EVE Online. And this works for everything. If you go to activate a shield extender, or armor plates, or a battery, if you're activating or deactivating an implant or warp drive, it will always happen on a server tick, which means it will happen simultaneously with anything else due to happen on that tick. Anyway, folks, I hope this clears up some of the confusion that's been going around in regards to things like warp times, align times, and so on and so forth. Certainly, hopefully that gives you an idea when it comes to what you should be aiming for how fast a ship can warp, etc. And hopefully it just explains some of the basic mechanics of the EVE universe. Anyway, folks, if you do have any questions, let me know in the comment section down below. Otherwise, happy sailing, and see you in New Eden!